Hello, 22 Tony here. Today I'd like to discuss the history of the 22 Rimfire cartridge. Now there are other Rimfire cartridges, other calibers. There's a 25 Rimfire, 32, 38, 41, 44, and some others. That's another discussion. Today we're just talking about the 22. Now if you're watching this video, you've probably fired hundreds if not thousands and maybe 10,000 rounds of 22. But you may not have thought about the history of it. It's by far the most popular cartridge in America and probably the world today. But again, it's got a very long and very interesting history. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit about the beginnings of the 22 Rimfire cartridge. So it originally started out in an 1831 patent that called for a thin case completely lined with priming powder and then basically a BB put into the end of it. So it started out again just a real thin case similar to this. Now this is modern, obviously this is an old one, but this is a percussion cap, and that's kind of the original design, was a thin case lined with priming powder. Okay, in 1845 the 22 BB cap was developed. And again, that was basically a percussion cap. It had the priming powder, and then it had a small rounded BB put in the end of it. And you came up with something that looked like this. So this is the tiny 22 BB cap. So again, it was just the percussion. Now this one's a little bit small, but it was a percussion cap, a little bit larger, and then a rim was formed to keep it from falling into the chamber. And then again, the ball cap was put, or the ball was put into it. Okay, now this was originally used basically for target shooting, indoor ranges, and didn't have much in the use of hunting, but it was at least the beginning of an empire. Well, in 1857, Smith & Wesson developed the 22 short. So as you can see, it's the same diameter as the BB cap, but it's a little bit longer. And it was originally designed to use 4 grains of black powder. Definitely had more power than the BB cap, and it was useful for target shooting, but it required a stronger backstop. So that cut down a little bit of the indoor shooting, but it was a huge step once we added the black powder. Then in 1871 came along the 22 long. Okay, the 22 long case is 0.2 inches longer than the BB cap, or the short, so 0.2 of an inch longer. And it was designed to use originally 5 grains of black powder. Now obviously black powder's gone away. Early part of the 20th century, everything was changed over, but originally this was all black powder. The case of the 22 long is still known today, or still used most commonly today in the 22 long rifle, but we'll get to that here in just a few moments. In 1880, the 22 extra long was developed. Now it was a longer case than the long, or the long rifle, and it contained 6 grains of black powder. It had a 40 grain bullet, just similar to the 22 long rifle. It was more powerful than the long rifle, which actually hadn't been developed quite yet, but it was a more powerful load. It just didn't have the accuracy. So when J. Stevens developed the 22 long rifle in 1887, they used the case of the 22 long. They used a longer bullet, so they gave them the extra length, and it outperformed the 22 extra long. So by 1935, the 22 extra long was no longer produced commercially. Now in 1888, possibly earlier, there's not a real date on this, but the 22 CB cap was produced. Now the 22 CB cap originally in 1888 was just a 22 BB cap with a conical bullet instead of the rounded bullet. Now today, I don't have one here today. I've somewhere in my collection I've got one, but today they do produce what they call 22 CB caps, but today's production is basically just a 22 short with the conical bullet, and they call it a CB cap, but it's not the same as the original 1888. Now in 1890, a new development came along. They developed the 22 Winchester Rimfire. Obviously 22 Winchester produced that. The 22 Winchester Rimfire was longer than the long rifle. It had a flat nose, but other than that it was identical to the 22 Remington Special, which had a rounded nose. The 22 WRF is still produced today for production, you know, specialty runs, not production runs, but specialty runs. There are different manufacturers that do produce it today. It was designed specifically for the Winchester 1890 slide rifle or pump action rifle. Then in 1903, as I said, right around the beginning of the 20th century, the producers started switching away from black powder to the more modern powders. In 1903, Winchester developed the model 1903 automatic rifle. The 1903 automatic had a problem with black powder. Black powder doesn't burn clean, and it would jam up the rifle. So Winchester developed the 22 Auto. The 22 Auto, as you can see, the case is just a little bit wider than the long rifle. They did that on purpose. The bullet is the same diameter, but the case was a little bit wider. And they did that to prevent the people at the time putting the 22 long into the model 1903 rifle, because the 22 long at the time was largely loaded with black powder, and they didn't want that, so they developed a new cartridge, the 22 Winchester Auto. 22 Winchester Auto, again, is pretty much gone by the wayside. Now, there weren't any real developments other than, you know, minor changes. There were different lubricants used and some different variations, but until 1959 there weren't any real major developments. In 1959 came the 22 Winchester Magnum, and we're probably all very familiar with that today. It's the same diameter as the 22 long or the 22 short, but it's a longer case and more powerful. Okay, now that gives you a brief history. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail. I want you to do your own research because it is very interesting. I didn't talk about some of the specialty like the shot shells and some of the other specialty items, but just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the history of the 22 Rimfire bullet. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please share, and please watch my other videos.